Hello, hello! Thank you so much for all the wonderful feedback on this image of my little boy. I'm just blown away, really. So, this is my original edit here. I've broken down the steps here to try and show you how I did it. I've never filmed a video before like this, so this will be trial and error, but here we go. So, this is how this image came into camera. Now, we are currently renovating. Well, renovation is the wrong word. We are adding on a new bedroom and office in our home, and so this is just sheetrock. There is a large window to the right and a piece of extra sheetrock over here to my left, kind of bouncing as a reflector back onto him. Now, quick note, I normally don't shoot inside, so this is kind of a first for me here, and I was pleasantly pleased with it. I may have to do it more often. This was shot on an 85mm lens, probably 12 feet from him, maybe 10. I'm pretty close for that lens. Let's see here. F-stop is 2.0, which is typical for me using really any lens with single subject, and ISO is 800, and my shutter speed is 800, which is a little high for this setting according to my histogram. However, I had just shot his 3-year-old sister and it just needed to be that high and I didn't change it. So I've got little kids running around here, so if you hear them, please excuse that, and let's dive right in. Alright, let's get started. First thing I do is I grab this crop tool here, and I click the straighten button, and then I just straighten up the horizontal. Let's try that again. I just straighten up the horizontal lines so that it just kind of helps me have a little bit better composure. Now, I'm a rule of thirds girl. For this image, I have him placed on the right, and I'm going to pull up and out a little bit just so it gives a little bit more room over here since he is looking into frame this way. I'm not going to worry about the black edges here because I'm going to show you how to fix that. So then I click the check mark. Okay, now I'm going to go to Layer, Duplicate Layer. I'm going to rename it just so you can know what I'm doing here. Now I'm going to take this rectangle marquee tool right here, and I'm going to come right in this area, and I'm just going to select an area here. I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and it's going to highlight this. I'm going to hold my Shift key down, I'm going to click in the center, and I'm just going to pull it to the left. And I'm going to click the OK button. I'm then going to Control D or Command D to deselect that. Okay. Now, because we just fixed that, I need to come up here and let's do another one. Okay. Control D. Control T, excuse me. Shift, click, and sorry, forgot to merge these layers. Layer, merge down. So that way this makes one image. Again, I'm going to Control J to also duplicate that background layer, and we're going to do it again. Still marquee tool. Click and drag. I'm going to hold Command T to highlight that selection. Shift, click, and pull up. Okay, and click Control D to deselect that. Now, this is fixed, essentially. It's going to get ugly before it gets better. Don't worry. Next thing I do is I take my patch tool here. I'm going to circle this ugly little open hole in the wall, and I'm going to click and pull down until it's there. Command D again to deselect. Now, so we have some imperfections here, which we're going to fix up now. So I'm not really worried about this one. My big thing here is I'm just going to try to clean this up really roughly, just as I can with my patch tool here. So I'm going to click, circle, click, and drag. Now this is not going to be pretty. It's just going to be a quick little fix here because we'll be altering that later down the road, so it doesn't really matter to me. See, so I just don't want any harsh lines. And sometimes it takes a few tries. Oh, what have I done? Okay, there we go. Sometimes it takes a few tries to figure it out, what you're going to do, where it's going to go. And sometimes you gotta just kind of play around with it a little bit. But like I said, we're going to blur this out, so it's not a huge, big deal to me. I don't know why that one isn't wanting to cooperate. So if you can't fix it that way, I just get my clone tool, Alt, click to sample an area, and just kind of blur that out. And it fixes it all the same. So let's go back to the patch tool here. Now, this line here, I don't like. I don't really mind it over here. I do not like it here. So I'm just going to kind of quickly blur that just a little bit. Again, not being too worried about it. Just kind of sloppily going through here as I'm clicking and pulling, because I just want to even it out just a little bit. Now normally it may take me a little more time as I get pretty OCD with steps like this in my work. However, for video purposes, I'm just trying to get through this. I don't want to take up your whole day here, which I could because I like to chat. So there we go. Now for these little spots here, I'm going to do the same thing, still with my patch tool. Click and drag. Oh. So, and I just like to clean up the little bits. It works out better. Okay. And it looks pretty good to me. So let's move on to the next step. Okay, now that I've gotten that background pretty cleaned up, it still looks a little rough, but I just kind of came through and cleaned everything up. I'll show you before and after here. Okay, let's click on over to the next step. So here we are. Let's make this where you try to get it as big as I can so you can see it. Oopsie. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I am going to add a lens blur filter to kind of even that up. It's pretty subtle, but when I click it off and click it on, you can see it just smoothed everything out. Now how I do that is I'm going to duplicate my background layer, Control G. I'm going to come to Filter. I already have it here, but Blur, Lens Blur. Now I stay in the 60s. That's where I like it. We're at Uniform, and you can, I like it on Transparency, so that way it just goes straight over that background layer. And you click OK. Okay. Now what that's going to look like is this. Now, oh, let's turn these off so it's not too much. Okay, so we've just got it pretty blurred here. I'm going to come here. I'm going to click this little box. It adds a layer mask. I'm going to make sure my brush is selected. I'm using a black brush, and I'm going to change my opacity to 50% so that I am not going to mess anything up and really make him pop. So then I just start clicking and masking that off of him. Now, I make sure I really get the main focal point there. Go with a little bigger brush, and I just kind of tap around him. Okay. I use my bracket keys to adjust my brush, but you can also do it in there as well. Okay, and I like to just make sure he's good. Okay, now then what I like to do is do one more little sweep around him just so he pops. And then I'm going to Control J and duplicate that layer up just so it looks really nice. Okay, then what I did is I shift clicked, I Control G, made it a group, and did another layer mask, and then took a smaller brush at 100% and just went around him so that he popped out like that. Okay, and just really smoothed it up. Okay, so again, oh, what did I do? There we go. Just really smoothed him up. The next thing I did was I did a levels adjustment to just kind of smooth out the histogram there. Okay, so I'm going to show you what my settings look like here. Okay, how I achieved that, let's turn that off. Came down here to this circle, which is your adjustments tool. Came up to levels. And you see, I just took these outside sliders and pulled it in just a bit. Okay, very subtle, but it just fixes your histogram. Now, it's not going to do this every time. Your numbers will be different. Okay, see, here are my numbers for the one I just did, and here they are for what I did earlier. You know, so we can slide the midtones over just a little bit, but it just is really, really subtle adjustment there. Okay, next thing I did was another levels adjustment to where I made him just pop just a little bit. Okay, how I did that, again, click, levels, and I took my whites, my highlights over here, and I just brought them in. Okay, just brighten it up overall, kind of makes him pop a little more. The next thing I did was another level, but this time is in brightness and contrast. So that's what this looks like. Just, again, evenly lit while still keeping the details of that dark. So how I did that, again, down here, click, brightness and contrast, and I just brought this slider over pretty far. And then I brought about a third of the contrast back. That's just kind of the level I'm comfortable at. Now you'll notice a huge difference in mine and the one I've pre-done. And the difference here is, this is obviously too bright. You have blown highlights and your shadows are almost non-existent. So I come back up here to my opacity, click, and drag. Just looking to see what's good to the eye. Looks about right. Alright, so I'm at 44. Let's see what I was. Oh, okay. So let's bring it down a little more. Let's bring it down about another 10%. Now this is all just to your eye, what you like, what looks good to you. Okay, so it's going to give you the same effect over that image. The next thing I did was a hue saturation level. So how I did that, click here again, hue saturation, and I like to really bump that up. Okay, we're bumped. Now, again, if I can click on the right layer, this is too hot. He's too yellow. There's a little too much orange. It looks fake, right? So again, we're going to play with that opacity slider. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more. Okay, again, always to taste, to your eye. Now, the next thing I did is I wanted to even this up. We're, again, back in levels. So, levels. We're going to come over. Looks about right. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, it's a little farther over. Okay. So, here we are. Okay. Now see, here's the difference here. Mine's pretty harsh. And the one that I previously did was a little lighter. Now here's why. When you do this, you can go ahead and lift it even more. So you come down here to your outputs level, and I love to go in multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30. So for this one, I want to even it out. See what that did? It just evens out the whole image. It gives it kind of an inside, glowy, hazy look, which I absolutely love. So this is how we got here. Let's go back over it one more time. Okay. I'm going to click all these off so I can just step by step show you one more time. So we did our lens blur. Okay. We did our just smoothing out that histogram, evening it up, pulling in those lights and those blacks. Gave that saturation just a little pop using the levels. We brightened it up by using brightness and contrast sliders. Gave it a little bit of saturation boost there. And then we did another levels layer to even out that light over him. So it just helps to furthermore blend all of those areas. Okay. Now that we've got everything blurred, all the blemishes, that cut your eye have been fixed, let's do some highlights and shadows adjustments. So, how I simply do that is with the shadows and highlights adjustment layer. So, that's before and after. What we're going to do is we're going to click layer, duplicate layer, click OK. We're going to come to Image, Adjustments, Shadows, and Highlights. Now these are the settings in which I used previously, so I just remembered them. The only difference is that we did was, as you can see here, the shadows I'm going to bring up to about 35%, and I'm going to add a little bit of color back in there, and click OK. Now obviously this is too much. So we're going to click that opacity and bring it down to about 50%. I like that. It makes him pop while still keeping that creamy background here. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some warmth. So what I like to do here is, again, let's see if I'll show. There we go. This is a levels layer. So this is done in the red channel, is how I do this. So again, here, levels, I'm going to come up to my red channel, and I'm just going to slide that over. Oh, that's too much, because there. So, there we go. Here we are. So the RGB stays the same. What I do is I go into that red channel, and I click it here. Now, obviously this is too much, so I'm just watching skin tones again. So here's before, here's after. Okay, so again, bring it down just a little bit more. There we go. Now we're gonna cool it up. We're gonna go to the other side. See? So I just really mask that up. How I do that, again, another levels. This time, gonna be in my blue channel. going to come pretty far with this. I'm going to go to 10. I'm going to, we're going to add a little more yellow, which I know is counterproductive, but I really kind of want to flatten it out a little bit. And then I'm going to leave that here. So then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this in. And pull those whites in. Oh, what? Hold on. Let me just double check my work here. Yeah, okay. I'm not pulling far enough. So let's go into 50. There we go. Wasn't quite enough. So you've got your warmth here, and then we came back in and just nicely kind of antiqued that with the cool. I love that combination of the warm and the cool. So here we go. Now the next thing I want to do is, this bothers me, so I'm going to add a color fill layer. How I do that is I'm going to go here, click, I'm going to add a solid color layer. Now, I love a good neutral, so I have colors that I just kind of stick to. What did I do? There we go. So, I have memorized all these little codes that I do. So, I've created a solid color fill layer. This is just a creamy neutral. I'm going to click on the layer mask. I'm going to Control or Command I to invert that. Now, I want this layer above that. Okay. I'm going to click my gradient tool. I'm going to switch my brush to white. And I'm going to make sure that this is on the transparent setting. Okay? I'm going to come back over here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click down here and I'm going to drag straight up. Oh, my brush is wrong. There we go. I'm going to drag straight up. And that really, you can see, evens out that line. You can add a little more if you want, however your eye likes. Again, I don't want it on him. I don't like that look. It's great. To each their own, right? So if you like that, please leave that on your image. I click the layer mask. I come back over to my brush, and at about 50% opacity on that brush, I switch to black, and I take it off of him. Because I love subject isolation, I want him to pop. So I just kind of mask that away. That's the great thing about these, is they're all a bunch of different levels of the same levels, really, or different adjustments, you know. It's a lot of little bitty adjustments just making a huge difference, okay? So there we go. Now, here's where this image really transforms. I use a texture. Bam. Now, this is the Rembrandt collection from Summerana at summerana.com. Now, you can use any texture that you want. There are a whole bunch of free ones online. Just Google studio background texture overlays. They're on Etsy if you want to purchase one. There's a lot of different ones. So let me show you how I put that in. I go to File, Place Embedded, and I chose number 24 because it was pretty similar to my background here. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to click Place. Now, I just click these little arrows and adjust it to my image like that, and then click OK. I'm not super picky about this portion of it. Okay. I'm going to adjust my layer here to multiply. So it darkens it up just a bit. But if you turn that on, here I've smoothed it. See? So we're going to do that here. I'm going to show you how. First things first, I like to adjust my opacity. down to where I think it just fits. Again, I just play with it. And no 2 times are going to be the same what you're doing. So you've clicked here. We're going to add a layer mask. Our brush is still black, and I'm still at 50%. So for this one, I like to go in with a bigger brush, pretty big. And I just like to tap it off of him. I don't want to take it off of him completely. And then I come back in. I bring my opacity of my brush back up to 100, and I'll take that completely off his face and most of his hair. Okay. Then I go back to 50% opacity for my brush, and then I continue masking off of him. I don't want to completely take it off, because when you completely take it off, you'll get some color cast and his skin won't look right. So I just keep going until I like it. No real rules here. If you like it, it's your image, that's all that matters. So, before and after. Okay. So, that is how I apply that texture. Again, you can find any texture online that you like for your images. It will do the same effect. Alright, let's get to the next step here. Click on over. There we go. Okay. Now that we've applied our texture and it's looking pretty good, what do I do next? His under eye circles are bothering me. I don't do a ton of skin editing on my boys. I've never liked that. So, but what I do want to do is I want to just, you see the difference there? Don't want to make him look so tired. So how I do that is I click my background layer, Control J, I grab my patch tool, and then I zoom in. Now he has freckles, which make this a little bit, I don't want to say the word easier, but I don't really have to worry as much with him because, so again, using my patch tool, I just click and circle, and then just pull down. And then I Control D to deselect. So I want it to look natural. So sometimes, like if I copy a freckle, I will just pull it over. Now over here, this takes a little bit more work because it's just a larger surface because of the way he's laying. So there we go. Okay, looking good. I'm going to do a little bit more here, just because I want it to look natural. Let's see here, a little bit more work. And again, this is all trial and error. You got to figure it out. What your kid, what your image needs. So, there we go. Again, pretty quickly, before and afters. Okay. Now again, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do a histogram check. So I pull up my levels layer here, and you can see I've just pulled in my blacks and my darks. So how I'm going to do that again is I'm going to go to levels, and you see here there's a gap. This is what I call a histogram check, or fixing your histogram. I'm going to pull it in, and I'm going to pull it in. Now this goes against what I've been trying to do because it added all this saturation here. So I'm going to come back to that output again in multiples of 10, and I'm going to lighten it back up. Really easy. Now, here we go. His skin, get that off his face, is looking a little red to me. So I'm going to add a color balance layer to fix that. Again here, color balance. Now again, this is just to eye. I zoom in on him, and I'm going to add some cyan because it sticks with the theme that we're doing here. Okay, I'm going to invert this layer mask so I can apply that just to him. This is the real trick, is applying adjustments just to your subject or taking away from them. So I'm going to Control I, it turned black. I'm going to take a white brush here. I click that, white brush, and I'm just going to start painting that on him. Again, I'm at 50% opacity because I don't want it to be too much. And I am just really painting it on. I'll zoom out and I'll click it on and off. That looks really good to me. He's still warm, but we've cooled him up. I'll add a little bit of that in here so that his hair isn't too much. Okay, now what I like to do is I like to do a pretty much even brightening layer here. So that's what this looks like. Okay, so we're going to do this 2 different ways. Okay, this is a curves level where I've just brightened him up. How I did that? Curves, and I just bumped those midtones. I inverted that at 100% opacity, and I just stamped it on him. Now, this is one way to do it. It works well. Okay? Now, let me show you how I like to do it. I like to do a levels adjustment. Okay? What that means is I like to come into levels, and I like to bring in those blacks, and I like to bring in those whites, and then again come back down here to 10, and I like to even it up. Okay? There we go. So what I didn't do here is I like to bump those midtones a little bit. Really even that up. Now here, let's see. Okay, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm not going... Maybe I am. I'm going to alter what I did a little bit. Again, I just wanted to soften it up. So that's what I did. Now, here's the fun part, where I get to make him pop. So I'm going to come down here to this add layer. I'm going to hold Alt and click on the add. This we're going to be our burn layer. We're going to set our mode to soft light, and I'm going to click this little box and I'm going to fill it with gray. Okay, I'm going to do it again for our dodge layer. I'm going to click here, soft light again, and I'm going to fill it with gray. Now, these layers are transparent. You can click them on and click them off. You can't see it. Now, I'm going to come over here to my dodge tool. That's this little magnifying glass. Now, what this layer does, I have it on top of my burn layer for a reason. This allows me to paint on the light. This makes him pop. Anywhere where there is light, I'm going to paint this on. Okay? Really subtly, really easily, I'm going to paint it on. On the burn layer, I'm going to come right over here. I'm going to click on my right click and click the burn tool. Now this goes on the shadows. So this is how you give that fine art edit. You add in the details. I'm going to go ahead and burn his eyelashes as well, so they pop a little more. Again, this is really sloppy here, but you get the point. I also like to go in and do some hair. Really, so it just all stands out. I like for him to pop. Now, little girls, I tend to do more than little boys. Again, all to your taste, but this just gives it that three-dimensional feel a little bit, I think. I also sometimes go in and do the shirt area. Okay. So you can just see. Turn on those shadows. Turn on that. And this just gives a pretty even adjustment to him that allows you to have some fun. All right, let me show you before and after here. So this is where we started. Okay, let me get this out of the way. This is where we started when we started these series of adjustments. We fixed our dark circles. We fixed our histogram by pulling in those blacks and whites again. We removed the redness from his skin. We added even light using levels. We burnt his skin, bringing in those shadows, and lightened up those highlights. And so from there, we're going to go to the next steps. Okay, so here's what we're going to do next. Now, we just came from here. And what I do is I'm merging these layers. I probably should have told you that. Let me delete these. Okay. I'm merging these and coming to the next thing, which I've pre-edited here. Okay, so I'm just going to show you again. Now, this, I want to add a mattifying effect. What that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and, again, even out these areas where we fixed. So how I do that is pretty simple. I'm going to do a levels layer, and I'm going to bring this in pretty far. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I think that'll work. I'm then going to do a solid color layer. And this is going to be my signature brown that I always use. All of my images have this brown in them at some point. It's just a good brown. Okay. And then I'm going to do another levels layer. And that is going to really just kind of matte. So this is going to be our, let's call it pop. This is our color. And this is our mattifying layer. Okay, so I am going to bring the pop down really probably to about 40%. It's where I like it. Subtle but not subtle. Okay. My color, clearly I can't spell today. Okay. We're going to bring that down to about 50%. See, there we go. Well, let's try 55. There we go. Okay. Now the matte layer, I want to bring to about 40%. I want it to be mattifying, but still see through it. Now I'm going to shift, click all three of those. I'm going to click Control G, makes them into a group. I'm going to add a layer mask. Now this is still a little much for me, so I'm going to probably cut that in half. There we go. I still want to be able to see the details through it. Again, I'm going to take my brush with a black brush at 50%. And I'm going to start, oh, hello. I'm going to start to mask that off of him. Because I want him to pop. I want my background to even out. So let's come back on one more time on his face and his hair. I like for him to stand out. See, and it just subtly pops him. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a vignette. Now I'm pretty picky about my vignettes. I don't like them to just be blaring. So I like to do a creamy one. Let me show you how I do that. Again, another levels layer. Okay, we're going to go pretty big in here at about 100. Now I know this because I do it all the time, so I'm just, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to this output. I'm going to type in 50, again, multiples of 10. And I want to go really about 190 here. Again, it just kind of mats that up. I'm bringing in the blacks and the whites. Okay, then I'm going to do a brightness layer, and I'm going to bring that down to about a -70. Okay, then again, I'm coming back in with my color that I always use, 342C22, my black. Okay, now this I'm going to group, Control G to group it, and I'm going to click on my brightness, right click, create clipping mask, color, right click, create clipping mask. Okay, I'm going to do that. Let me just check that. Okay, perfect, that's what I thought. Here, we're going to come back to our levels, and we are going big brush at 100%, and we're going to tap, 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 tap. See what we did? We're revealing him. Okay? Oh, too many times. Let's try that again. 1, 2. Okay. And then I'll come in and really get him. Okay. Now, I'm going to bring my opacity way down. Way down. There we go. That looks good. Now, if I see any areas on him that I need to fix, on the group layer mask is where I do that again. Okay? Before really just doing that. Now, I want to color tone the reds. Just going to warm it up a little bit. How I did that? Again, a levels layer. So I clicked levels, opened it up here. I came into my red channel, and I pulled this slider here over to meet it. And I just reddened up the tone a little bit, gave him a little bit more warmth. Now, his skin needs to be fixed again. So I applied that to the background. Instead of taking it off of him, I did a color fill layer and brightened up his face. So I clicked color, solid color, and I chose a peachy color. So I chose a peachy color, and what I did is I took my white brush and I just painted that over his face. So it brightened him up like that. Okay. And I also adjusted the opacity so that it left the contrast on him. Then I did a curves layer, bumping those midtones so that I brightened him up. Again, I just watch his skin. Control I, brush, and I'm just focusing on his face. So I'm just really brightening him up there. Now I came back in and added another texture. This time, click File, Place Embedded, and I chose 19, this darker one. Again, you can use the same texture that you did before, if that's what you have, or you can Google a darker one. Whatever works. Again, I change it to multiply. It just darkens it. And adjust that opacity. Layer mask. And I brush off of him at 50%. Otherwise, you'll get a color shield on him. And you don't want funky colors on the kiddos, because they just look silly. So you just mask that off however you like. Okay, so I needed to brighten him up a little bit more. So I did a curves layer, pulled up on those midtones, and then what I did is, because I wanted his hair to be still contrasty, I took it off a little bit. And I may change my opacity of my brush to 25 and just kind of brush it off him a little bit as well. So that way you're just giving a nice smooth this there. I also wanted to remove some redness from the image. It's still really warm, and I decided I wanted to keep with the creams. So how I did that was a color balance layer, and I took 6 out. So again, clicking here, color balance, and then I just adjusted this slider on the red, and there you go. That's how I got that one. Okay, the last thing that I do before I save it is I want to sharpen it, so that if you're posting it on Facebook or you're printing it, his features are really sharp. So how I did that was, I like a high pass layer. Oh, wrong one. So I really like a high pass layer. So how I do that is I duplicate my background layer, filter, other, high pass. Now, I have mine set where I like it. I want to just see all the details of him. I like to go a little bit overboard, really, than some people would. So I just click OK. I click it to soft light. I think that's what I did. No, I did overlay. Okay. Click it to overlay, so it's not adjusting the image, it's just popping it, and you can see how his little freckles come out when I do that. See? So another thing that I like to do, I sharpen his eyes. So Control G, filter, sharpen, smart sharpen, and it just kind of does it for you. Come on. I add a layer mask. I invert that with my white brush at about 50%. I come back in over his eyes, and I just do the eyes and the eyelashes, because I want those to stand out. And let's do his lips, why not? Okay, so he has really dark eyes, and inside this light it doesn't help, so I like to just brighten them up just a little bit. How I do that is a saturation adjustment. So I just click here, hue saturation. See? Oh, what did I do? There we go. Okay. Hue saturation, and I do about 15. I invert that mask, see? And I just paint it over his eyeballs, just like that. And so it's just those little subtle things. Next, I like to just make them pop a little more because they are so dark. Click here, brightness and contrast here. And I just play with these sliders to what I like. And I'm always adjusting those opacities, as you can see, so they're not too bad. Now I want to brighten him up a little bit more because I want his features to show up. So what I do is I just click that, and then I paint over him. So it's just that brightness. I don't have to do anything. You can click auto if you like, but it should work just fine. Next thing I do is I wanted to warm him up, the whole image. So I clicked in my selective color layer here. Okay. I went down into my yellows and I added about 7 here. And I just overall warmed him up, the whole image. And then I added my name to the bottom. I clicked File, Export. I'm exporting for web. And I like to do my biggest number at that. I click Save. And I save it to my desktop to share with whatever I want to name it. So it's just a whole bunch of little adjustments that I'm applying individually to him. So let me show you. This is where I started. Actually, this is where, hold on. Okay, this is where we started, and that's where we finished. So it's just a bunch of little adjustments that get you to where you want to. Oh, this one's a little cooler, but that's okay. So we started here, and I finished here. Let me know if you have any questions. Hey guys, so I just wanted to hop on here and let you know that I did create an action set here for y'all to use. It's all the steps that we did in today's tutorial. That will be linked down in the description below. Quick note that if you have a black box here, you want to use your brush on white to apply it where you would like. If it is a white box, you want to change it by clicking here or clicking X on your keyboard to change it to the black brush to then apply where you want. If you need to remove something, just switch back to white or black. Have a great day.